My sister's wedding planner called. Your family asked to remove you from the guest list, but they want to keep the $50,000 deposit you paid. I smiled and said, actually, cancel the entire event. She hesitated. But sir, you're not the groom. I replied calmly, no, but I own the venue. The city lights outside my office window blurred into a soft, hazy glow. It was almost 9 o'clock, and the cleaning crew had already made their rounds, leaving behind the faint, clean scent of lemon polish. I was staring at a spreadsheet, the numbers swimming before my eyes, but my mind wasn't on profit margins or quarterly reports. It was on flowers. Specifically, the $5,000 invoice for peonies and white roses for my sister Bronwyn's wedding. For the past 6 months, my life had become a series of invoices. The venue, the caterer, the dress, the 10-piece band she just had to have. I was Leland, the reliable older brother, the one who'd made something of himself. And in my family, that meant I was the designated checkbook. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose where a dull headache was beginning to form. It was a familiar feeling. I'd felt it when I co-signed the loan for my dad's failing business, and again when I set up a generous college fund for Bronwyn so she wouldn't have the student debt I'd had. I did it because that's what you do for family. You show up, you provide. You hope that one day, they'll see you, not just what you can do for them. This wedding, I told myself, would be the last big thing. A final, grand gesture. I wanted to see my little sister happy, walking down the aisle in a storybook wedding that she and her fiancé, Hayes, couldn't possibly afford on their own. I'd poured my heart, and a significant portion of my savings, into making it perfect. I pictured the day, me, sitting in the front row watching her say, I do, feeling a quiet sense of pride. Maybe, just maybe, during the reception, she'd raise a glass and say a few words about the brother who made it all possible. It was a foolish hope, I know, but it was a hope I clung to. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened my online banking portal. The caterer needed the final deposit by midnight. My finger hovered over the confirm transfer button. It was another $20,000. A sum that could have been a down payment on a small vacation home, a new car, or just a comfortable cushion in my own life. Instead, it was going toward artisanal cheese platters and a champagne fountain. I had a meeting with a potentially huge investor tomorrow morning at 8. I should have been home hours ago, resting, preparing my pitch. Instead, I was here, ensuring Bronwyn's day would be flawless. I clicked the button. The screen flashed, transfer successful. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. It wasn't just the late hour. It was a bone-deep weariness that had been settling in for years. I packed my briefcase, the leather worn and soft from years of use, and headed for the door. As I locked up, my phone buzzed. A text from Bronwyn. My heart gave a little leap. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the thank you I'd been waiting for. I pulled out my phone and read the message. 2 words. Got it. That was it. No thank you. No, you're the best brother ever. Not even an emoji. Just a cold, transactional confirmation. I stood there in the empty hallway, the sterile quiet of the building pressing in on me. The headache behind my eyes sharpened. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the screen dark, and walked toward the elevator, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle over me like a heavy coat. I'd always hoped my generosity would buy me a little warmth, a little recognition. But as the elevator doors slid shut, I had to face a cold, hard truth. All it ever bought me was the next bill. The drive home was quiet. The city was a river of red and white lights, each car carrying people home to their lives, their families. I wondered what their family dynamics were like. Were they as complicated as mine? This feeling, this sense of being an outsider in my own family wasn't new. It was a story written in chapters, each one a memory of a sacrifice I'd made, a boundary I'd let them cross. My mind drifted back almost 20 years. I was in college, driving a beat-up but beloved 1989 Mustang. It was my pride and joy. I'd spent a whole summer working double shifts at a diner to buy it. It smelled of old leather and freedom. Then came the call from my mom, Corinne. My dad, Thatcher, had gotten into some trouble. Again. A bad bet, A sure thing that went south. He owed some dangerous people a lot of money, and they weren't patient. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. My mom's voice was strained, trying to sound calm but failing. Leland, honey, we don't know who else to turn to. Your father, he's so ashamed. Ashamed. He was always ashamed, but never ashamed enough to stop. I knew what she was asking without her saying it. I sold the Mustang the next day. I didn't even haggle. I just took the first offer, a number that made my stomach clench. I watched a stranger drive my freedom away, the taillights disappearing around the corner. I sent every last dollar to my parents. My dad never mentioned it again. Not once. It was just absorbed. Another problem Leland had fixed. Then there was Bronwyn, my bright, bubbly, ambitious little sister. 2 years ago, she and Hayes came to me with a business proposal. They had a revolutionary idea for a boutique marketing firm. They had a business plan that looked impressive, full of buzzwords and optimistic projections. All they needed was a little seed money, an investment. It's a sure thing, Lee, Hayes had said, his smile a little too wide. We'll pay you back with interest in the first year. Bronwyn had looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes she'd perfected since childhood. Please, Leland, this is our dream. You'd be helping us build a future. How could I say no to her future? I transferred them $100,000. For the first few months, I'd get enthusiastic updates. Client meetings are going great. We're about to land a huge contract. Then the updates slowed down. When I asked how things were going, the answers became vague. It's tough, you know? The market is tight. We're having some cash flow issues, but we're pushing through. I felt a knot of suspicion, but I pushed it down. This was my sister. I had to trust her. That trust shattered on a quiet Tuesday night about a year later. I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, a habit I picked up on lonely evenings. I stumbled upon the profile of one of Bronwyn's friends, and there it was, an album titled Euro Trip Extravaganza. The date stamp was from the exact time their company was supposedly struggling with cash flow. There were pictures of them in Paris, glasses of champagne held high with the Eiffel Tower sparkling behind them. Pictures of them riding a gondola in Venice, Hayes looking lovingly at Bronwyn. Pictures of them on a sun-drenched beach in Greece. They looked happy, carefree, and very, very wealthy. I clicked through the photos, a cold fury building in my chest. There was a photo of Bronwyn holding up a designer handbag, the caption reading, "My amazing fiancé knows how to spoil me. Hashtag best fiancéver, hashtag living the dream. My $100,000. My investment in their future." It wasn't seed money for a business. It was a luxury vacation fund. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the silent apartment. The betrayal was sharp and bitter. It wasn't just the money. It was the ease with which they had lied, the complete lack of respect. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my trust and laughed about it all the way across Europe. And I, like a fool, had let them. I had funded the very performance of a life they were living at my expense. That was the first major crack in the foundation. And I knew, deep down, it wouldn't be the last. The next morning, I was in my kitchen, trying to shake off the lingering bitterness from the night before. I was running on 4 hours of sleep, the investor presentation looming. I was pouring my second cup of black coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was for the town where the wedding venue was located. I figured it was a vendor with a last-minute question. I answered, putting the phone on speaker as I stirred my coffee. "Leland? This is Geneva from the Willows estate." Her voice was different from our previous calls. Usually, she was crisp and professional, all business. Today, she sounded nervous. There was a tremor in her voice she couldn't quite hide. "Hi, Geneva. Everything okay?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee. There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of papers rustling on her end. "Well, I'm calling to double-check something. It's a rather unusual request, and since your name is on all the contracts as the primary payer, I felt I had to confirm with you directly." "An unusual request? What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I received a call from your mother. Corinne, about an hour ago. She was very insistent. She requested an update to the final guest list. I waited. A sense of dread began to crawl up my spine. Geneva's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Your family requested that you be removed from the guest list. The ceramic mug in my hand felt suddenly heavy, cold. The coffee machine gurgled in the background, a mundane sound in a moment that felt anything but. I must have misheard her. I'm sorry, I said slowly. Could you repeat that? They asked that your name, Leland, be taken off the list of attendees, she said, her voice firmer now, as if repeating it made it more real for her, too. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the world tilting slightly. Removed. They had removed me. It wasn't enough that I was paying for every last detail of this fantasy. I wasn't even allowed to witness it. I was the ghost at the feast, the silent benefactor who was expected to disappear after the checks cleared. Geneva, sensing my silence, continued hesitantly. That's not all, sir. Your mother was very clear on this next point. They want to keep the $50,000 security deposit you've already paid. In full. And there it was. The final, brutal truth. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a calculated, cold-blooded transaction. Take his money and then throw him away. The years of quiet resentment, of feeling used and unappreciated, all coalesced into a single, blinding moment of clarity. The cracks in the foundation didn't just break. They shattered into dust. Something inside me shifted. The hurt, the shock, it was all there. But something else rose to the surface. The strange, chilling calm. The part of me that had always hoped for their love and approval finally died. And in its place, something new and hard was born. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. A small, humorless smile touched my lips. Actually, Geneva, I said, my voice so quiet she had to strain to hear. Cancel the whole thing. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could picture her in her pristine office, surrounded by photos of happy couples, her pen frozen over a notepad. But, sir, she finally stammered, the professionalism completely gone. You're not the groom. I let the silence hang for a moment longer, savoring it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city waking up below, a city I had conquered on my own. No, Geneva, I replied calmly. I'm not, but I own the venue. The silence on the other end of the line was so profound I thought for a second she might have hung up. I could hear her faint, sharp intake of breath. You what? She whispered. The Willows estate, I said, my voice level and clear. I'm the principal owner of the holding company that acquired it 18 months ago. My name is Leland, and I am invoking my authority to cancel the event scheduled for this Saturday. Effective immediately. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. I ended the call and stood there for a moment. The quiet of my apartment a stark contrast to the storm I had just unleashed. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't fixing their problem. I was the problem, and it felt powerful. I walked over to my laptop, my movements deliberate. I opened my email, found the contract chain with all the wedding vendors, the one where I was copied on everything, the silent recipient of endless planning emails I was never asked to contribute to, other than financially. I drafted a new message. The subject line was simple: event cancellation. The body of the email was just as brief. Per my conversation with the venue coordinator and my authority as the sole financier and property owner, the Monroe/Hayes wedding is hereby canceled. All contracts are terminated. All deposits are to be handled according to the cancellation clauses outlined in our agreements. Thank you, Leland. My finger hovered over the send button for a fraction of a second. This was it, the point of no return. I thought of my sister's smiling face in those Europe photos, my mother's dismissive tone, my father's convenient helplessness, and I clicked send. The digital whoosh of the email leaving my outbox was the starting pistol for the chaos. I went about my morning. I showered. I got dressed for my big presentation. I tried to focus on my pitch, but a part of my mind was waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:17 a.m., my phone began to vibrate on the kitchen counter. It didn't stop. It buzzed and chimed like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. A flood of notifications lit up the screen. Missed call, mom. Missed call, mom. Voicemail, mom. Missed call, Bronwyn. Text message, Dad. I ignored them all. I picked up the phone only to watch the family group chat, Monroe clan, explode in real time. Bronwyn. What is going on? The venue just called me crying saying the wedding is cancelled. Is this some kind of sick joke? Dad. Leland, call your mother. Now. Bronwyn. Hayes is freaking out. His parents are on a plane right now. What am I supposed to tell them? Mom. Leland. You have 5 minutes to call me and explain what devil has possessed you before I come over there myself. I watched the frantic messages pile up. A cold, detached observer. They weren't asking if I was okay. They weren't asking for my side of the story. They were demanding, ordering, blaming. They couldn't conceive of a world where their personal ATM had suddenly decided to close its account. I saw the little bubble indicating my mom was typing again. I waited. Mom. I cannot believe you would be this selfish. After everything we've done for you. You are ruining your sister's life. You are tearing this family apart. Everything we've done for me. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I set the phone face down on the counter. The buzzing continued. A frantic, impotent vibration against the cold granite. I picked up my briefcase, checked my tie in the reflection of the microwave, and walked out the door. I had an investor to meet. They had a mess of their own making to figure out. The storm had begun, and for the first time, I wasn't rushing out to buy the umbrellas. I was content to stay inside, perfectly dry. The presentation went flawlessly. I was sharp, focused, and confident. The investors were impressed. We shook hands on a deal that would significantly expand my company's reach. As I walked out of the boardroom, feeling the thrill of a professional victory, I glanced at my phone. 37 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, countless texts, the digital debris of my family's implosion. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. In fact, the professional success felt like a confirmation. I had built this life, this success, brick by brick, while they were busy seeing me as nothing more than a resource to be tapped. And they had no idea just how deep that resource ran. The venue wasn't just a recent acquisition. It was a strategic one. I had started quietly investing in properties and businesses years ago, diversifying my portfolio. It was my safeguard, my quiet rebellion against a family that saw my salary as their safety net. They thought the Willows estate was just a pretty place Bronwyn had found on a wedding blog. They had no idea that when I agreed to pay for it, I was essentially moving money from one of my pockets to another. And that wasn't all. I drove not home, but to a small, quiet coffee shop downtown. I needed a moment to think, to strategize. I ordered an espresso and sat at a small table in the corner. I pulled out my phone and made my second call of the day. Bonjour catering, this is Antoine. The voice was smooth, French, and belonged to the head chef of the most exclusive catering company in the state. Antoine, it's Leland, I said. Ah, Monsieur Leland, I trust you are well. We are deep in preparation for your sister's magnificent wedding. The truffle sauce for the filet mignon is, if I may say so, divine. About that, Antoine, there's been a change of plans. The wedding is off. A beat of silence. Off? But the ingredients, the staff, we have purchased everything. I'm aware, and you will be compensated in full, as per our contract. But your services are no longer required for the Monroe Hayes event. But, monsieur, the bride doesn't sign your checks, Antoine. I do. I paused, then added, I'm still the majority shareholder in this company, aren't I? He coughed. Yes, of course, monsieur. Your instructions will be followed immediately. One down. Now for the final piece. The hotel. The grand, historic hotel where Hayes' entire family, parents, grandparents, cousins from 3 different states, were due to check in that very afternoon. Bronwyn had made a huge deal about it, wanting to impress her future in-laws. I had, of course, paid for the entire block of rooms. I dialed the hotel's main line. I didn't ask for the front desk. I asked for the general manager, a man I'd had lunch with just last month to discuss quarterly earnings. You see, the hotel wasn't just a hotel. It was the flagship property of a hospitality group my company, Leland Holdings, had acquired 2 years prior. As I laid out the instructions to cancel the entire booking block, my mind drifted to the moment that had truly sealed their fate. It was about 3 months ago at a family brunch. I'd arrived a little late from a business trip. I walked in quietly and heard my mother and Bronwyn talking in the kitchen, their voices low and conspiratorial. "He's not actually expecting a +1, is he?" Bronwyn had asked, a note of derision in her voice. "It's not like he's ever dating anyone. Always so serious, always working." My mother, Corinne, had laughed. A light, tinkling sound that sent a shard of ice through my heart. "Oh, honey, don't worry about Leland. Leland doesn't need a seat at the table. He just needs to know where to send the check. He's the family wallet, that's all. A very useful, very reliable wallet. A wallet, not a son, not a brother. A thing, an object to be used." I had backed away silently, my heart pounding in my ears. I never let them know I'd heard. I just smiled, made excuses for being late, and paid for the brunch. But those words had been branded into my memory. Now, sitting in this coffee shop, the quiet hum of conversation around me, I finally allowed myself to feel the full, righteous anger of that moment. They had made me an object, so I would act like one. Cold, impersonal, and completely in control of the finances. The wallet was now closed, and they were about to find out just how broke they really were without it. For a few hours, there was a strange, deceptive silence. The barrage of calls and texts stopped. I knew it wasn't a truce. It was the calm before a different kind of storm. They were regrouping, planning their next assault. I used the time to finally get to my office and deal with the fallout from my missed morning. My secretary, a wonderfully efficient woman named Carol, had handled everything with her usual grace. But there were still things that needed my attention. I was in the middle of reviewing a contract when my private line, the one only a handful of people had, began to ring. It was my mother. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a morbid curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what new tactic she would try. I leaned back in my chair and picked up the phone. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, my voice flat. There was no shouting this time. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she used when she thought she was being clever, when she was about to lay a trap. "Leland, darling, I know you're upset. We all are. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. Was it a misunderstanding when you told the wedding planner to kick me off the guest list?" "Oh, that," she said with a dismissive little laugh. "That was just your sister being a silly bridezilla. You know how she gets. And I was just trying to keep the peace. We were going to add you back on, of course. We were just making room." The lie was so blatant, so insulting, it was almost impressive. "And the $50,000 deposit?" I pressed. "Was that part of keeping the peace, too?" "Leland, let's not get bogged down in details," she said smoothly. "The important thing is that we fix this. Hayes's family has landed. They're on their way to the hotel as we speak. I've already called the caterer back and told them the cancellation was a mistake. But the hotel, they're being difficult. They say the order came from the top." Her voice hardened slightly. "They say it came from you." "That's right. It did." "Well, you need to undo it," she commanded. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No, I don't think I do. The booking is canceled. The catering is canceled. The venue is canceled. It's over." And then came the twist, the move I never saw coming. "Oh, I don't think so, darling," she cooed, and I could practically hear the smug smile in her voice. "You see, I was doing a little reminiscing today, looking through some old paperwork, and I found the most interesting document, the incorporation papers for Leland Holdings from all those years ago." My blood ran cold. "Do you remember, Leland?" she continued, her voice dripping with poison. "When you were just starting out, you were so brilliant, but you had no credit, no collateral. You needed a guarantor, a partner on paper just to get the business loan. And who was it that stepped up for you? Who put her name right next to yours? I was silent, a stone in my throat. I remembered my desperation, my gratitude when she'd agreed to co-sign. I'd had her name legally removed as an active partner years later, once the company was stable, but I'd never thought, "That's right, dear," she purred, savoring the moment. "It was me. And while you may have pushed me out of the day-to-day, the lawyers tell me that a founding partner still retains certain privileges, especially when it comes to the company's assets. Assets like, say, a chain of hotels." My mind was racing, scrambling through legal knowledge I hadn't needed in years. Was it possible? Could that old signature give her some kind of leverage? "I've already had my lawyer send a letter to the hotel's management," she said, delivering the killing blow, "informing them that the cancellation order from one partner, you, is being overridden by the other founding partner, me. The reservations for the Hayes family will be honored. The wedding might not be at that pretty little estate, but your sister will have her reception. And you will pay for it." She paused, letting it all sink in. "You think you're so smart, Leland. You think you hold all the cards. But you forgot who taught you how to play the game. I'll see you Saturday. Or maybe not." She hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The feeling of power I'd had all day evaporated, replaced by a wave of nausea. She had outmaneuvered me. She had used my own success, the very empire I had built to escape them, as a weapon against me. The battle wasn't over. It had just entered a whole new, terrifying arena. The smugness in my mother's voice echoed in my head. For a moment, I was that desperate young man again, hat in hand, needing her help. But only for a moment. The shock quickly hardened into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. She wanted to play this game? Fine. I had built this company from the ground up. I knew its every secret, its every strength, and its every weakness. My first call was to David, my corporate lawyer. He was sharp, relentless, and had the bedside manner of a shark, which was exactly what I needed right now. I explained the situation, my voice clipped and precise. David was silent for a long moment after I finished. I could hear the faint clicking of his keyboard. "Leland, this is messy," he finally said. "She's technically correct. A founding signature on original incorporation documents can be a nightmare to untangle if she decides to press it. She could try to argue she's entitled to a share of the company's assets, maybe even claim wrongful termination of her partnership." "She has no claim, David," I said, pacing my office. "She never invested a dime. She never attended a single meeting. Her signature was a formality to secure a loan that I paid off 20 years ago." "I know that, and you know that," David said. "But we need to prove that. We need to build a case that her role was passive and ceremonial, and that her current actions are malicious and detrimental to the company's interests. This isn't a family squabble anymore. This is corporate warfare." The next 48 hours were a blur of legal strategy. David and his team descended on my office, turning my conference room into a war room. We pulled decades of financial records, board meeting minutes, partnership agreements, and tax filings. We were looking for a silver bullet, a single clause that would invalidate her claim. While the legal team worked, my family, emboldened by my mother's apparent victory, renewed their assault. Hayes, my sister's fiancé, left a rambling, threatening voicemail on my phone, talking about suing me for emotional distress and the humiliation he was suffering. It was so ridiculous I almost laughed. My dad, Thatcher, tried a different approach. He sent a text that was clearly dictated by my mother. "Son, your mother is just trying to protect your sister. Don't let your pride destroy this family. Think about the inheritance, the legacy." Inheritance. The word hung in the air. The only legacy they were interested in was the one I was building, the one they felt entitled to. The work was grueling. We spent hours sifting through boxes of old, dusty files from a storage unit. My eyes burned from staring at fine print. Doubt began to creep in. What if she was right? What if some legal loophole from my past was about to unravel everything I had ever worked for? It was 3 in the morning on Thursday when we found it. A junior associate, A young kid barely out of law school with eyes like a hawk pointed to a paragraph in the amended partnership agreement from 2005. The one-eyed had drawn up to formally remove my mother from any operational role. Here, he said, his voice laced with tired excitement. Section 4, subsection B. Dormant Partner Clause. It states that any non-contributing, non-salaried partner who has not participated in a board meeting or contributed to financial oversight for a period of 60 consecutive months forfeits all emergency executive privileges. David read it, then read it again. A slow grin spread across his face. 60 months, he said. That's 5 years. Leland, has your mother ever attended a board meeting? Never, I said, a surge of adrenaline cutting through my exhaustion. Has she ever asked to see a financial statement? Signed a corporate check? Anything? Nothing. She wouldn't even know how. David clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the quiet room. That's it, he said. That's our kill shot. She hasn't been involved for over 20 years. Her founding partner status is nothing more than a historical footnote. She has no power here. The relief was so immense it almost brought me to my knees. We had it. We had the weapon we needed to end this once and for all. My mother thought she was clever, digging up a ghost from the past. But she'd forgotten one thing about me. I always read the fine print. With the dormant partner clause as our ammunition, David drafted a cease and desist letter that was a masterpiece of legal devastation. It was delivered by courier to my mother's lawyer first thing Friday morning, the day before the now-canceled wedding. It outlined, in excruciating detail, her complete lack of authority and warned of a countersuit for corporate interference and malicious intent if she or any member of the family attempted to contact my businesses again. The response was immediate silence. The smugness was gone, replaced by the stunned quiet of a checkmate. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction, but I knew it wasn't over. The final confrontation had to be face-to-face. Came sooner than I expected. Around noon, my secretary buzzed me. Mr. Leland, your sister is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, and she seems quite agitated. Send her in, Carol, I said, straightening my tie and standing behind my large mahogany desk. I would not be the frightened boy cowering. I would be the man who owned this building. The door flew open, and Bronwyn stormed in. Her face was blotchy and swollen from crying, her designer dress wrinkled. The picture of a spoiled princess whose castle had just been repossessed. Hayes was not with her. She was alone. How could you? She shrieked, her voice raw. How could you do this to me? To your own family? The same way you could take my money and use it for a European vacation? I asked calmly, my voice dangerously low. The same way you could stand by while Mom called me a wallet? The same way you could kick me out of your wedding? She flinched, but the anger quickly returned. That was Mom's idea. I didn't want to. But you've ruined everything. Hayes's family hates me. They flew all the way here for nothing. They think our family is a joke. Our family is a joke, Bronwyn, I said, the words tasting like ash. It's a sick, twisted joke where I'm the punchline. Or at least I was. She took a step closer to my desk, her hands clenched into fists. You've always been jealous of me. Jealous that I was Mom and Dad's favorite. Jealous that I was getting married and you have no one. The accusation was so childish, so far from the truth, that all I could do was shake my head. Jealous? I paid for your college education, Bronwyn. I paid for your first car. I paid for the down payment on your condo. I paid for this wedding. The only thing I'm jealous of is your complete and utter inability to feel a single shred of gratitude or shame. Tears streamed down her face now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. You can fix this. You can still call everyone. Tell them it was a mistake. You can give me the money, and we can plan another wedding, a smaller one. You have to. Have to. I repeated the words slowly. No, Bronwyn. I don't have to do anything. The bank is closed. Forever. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The reality of her situation was finally crashing down on her. The money was gone. The safety net was gone. I was gone. She let out a guttural sob. You've ruined my life. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the polished wood of my desk. I looked my sister directly in the eye, and for the first time, I didn't see the little girl I was supposed to protect. I saw a stranger. No, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. I just stopped paying for it. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression a mixture of hatred and disbelief. Then, without another word, she turned and fled from my office, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the room, a final, definitive end. That was the last time I ever spoke to my sister. The door closed behind her, and I felt a strange sense of peace descend. The war was over, but my journey was not. Thank you for staying with me until now. Please show your support by liking this video and typing 1 in the comments below. It lets me know that you've given me a like and are here with me on this journey. Your encouragement is a huge source of motivation. Comment number 1 below and stay with me as I continue my story. The weekend that was supposed to be filled with wedding bells was eerily quiet. My phone remained silent. The family group chat was a digital ghost town. It was a strange feeling, like the aftermath of a hurricane. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape I barely recognized. I spent Saturday just being. I went for a long walk in the park, bought myself a ridiculously expensive coffee, and sat on a bench watching the world go by. I felt hollowed out, but also lighter than I had in years. On Sunday evening, my phone finally rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but something told me to answer. Leland. The voice on the other end was frail, but clear, like a tiny bell. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. Grandma Isadora? I asked, my own voice thick with emotion. My grandmother was my father's mother, a woman of quiet strength and fierce integrity. She had moved to a retirement community in Arizona a decade ago, and our contact had dwindled to Christmas cards and the occasional, awkward holiday phone call, usually with my mother hovering in the background. It's me, dear, she said. I heard there was some trouble. Word travels fast, even to Arizona, I thought. You could say that, Grandma. Your father called me, she said. He was upset. Told me you'd lost your mind, that you'd ruined everything. I listened to him for about 5 minutes, and then I told him to stop his whining and tell me what really happened. I couldn't help but smile. That was my grandmother. So I told her, I said, everything. The guest list, the deposit, the years of feeling like a wallet, the lies, the legal battle with Mom. She listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the faint sound of a ticking clock in her room. Your mother, Corinne? She finally said, her voice heavy with a long-held sadness. She was always a woman who loved the idea of family more than the people in it. She wanted the perfect picture, and she didn't care who she had to crop out to get it. She paused. I know it's no excuse for how she's treated you, but you need to understand something, Leland. Her own mother was a cold woman. Love in her childhood home was a transaction. You did something good, you got a little affection. You stepped out of line, you got silence. Corinne learned early on that love was something you had to control, to manipulate. She never learned how to just give it. And she passed that broken lesson on to her children. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. A piece of a puzzle I never knew was missing. It didn't erase the pain, but it softened the edges of my anger. I'm not telling you this so you'll forgive her, Grandma Isadora continued, as if reading my mind. Lord knows, she may not deserve it. I'm telling you this so you can understand it's not about you. It was never about you. It was about her own emptiness, her own fears. Tears I didn't know I'd been holding back started to well in my eyes. You have a good heart, Leland, she said softly. It's the best part of you. Your kindness isn't a weakness. It was just misplaced. You spent so long trying to earn a seat at their table. You forgot you had the strength to build your own. Her words landed with the simple, profound truth that only a grandmother can deliver. She was right. All this time I thought I was the problem. That if I just worked harder, gave more, tried harder, they would finally love me. But you can't fill an empty cup from a dry well. You did the right thing, my boy, she whispered. It was hard, and it was ugly, but you chose yourself. And it's about time someone did. We talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. When we hung up, the hollow feeling inside me was gone. In its place, something new was taking root. Felt a little like peace. The weeks that followed were a strange new kind of normal. The silence from my family was absolute. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. At first, it was unsettling. I'd catch myself checking my phone, bracing for an angry text that never came. But slowly, the unsettling quiet transformed into a peaceful quiet. It was the sound of freedom. My work became my sanctuary. I poured my energy into my company, not as an escape, but with a renewed sense of purpose. This company wasn't just my livelihood. It was a testament to my resilience. It was the thing I had built for myself, away from the toxic soil of my family. One afternoon, I got a call from Geneva, the wedding planner from the Willows estate. "Mr. Leland," she said, her voice much warmer than before. "I'm calling because the cancellation has been fully processed. But we have the ballroom sitting empty this Saturday night. We'll lose a fortune. I was wondering if you might know anyone looking for a last-minute booking at a significant discount." An idea sparked in my mind, faint at first, then blazing into life. An empty ballroom, a canceled celebration, felt like a symbol, an opportunity. "Actually, Geneva," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I think I do know someone." Me. I didn't want to let the space be a monument to a painful memory. I wanted to reclaim it, to overwrite the ugliness with something good. I decided to turn their canceled wedding into a celebration of something else entirely. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity. I called my lawyer, David, not for legal advice, but for a favor. He was on the board of several local charities. "David," I said, "I have a fully staffed, fully catered ballroom at the Willows this Saturday, and I want to fill it with people who deserve a night out." The idea was simple. I would host a gala, not for the city's elite, but for its unsung heroes. Specifically, I wanted to honor men who, like me, had given too much of themselves to situations that gave back too little. Men who had been caregivers, providers, peacekeepers, who had put their own dreams on hold for the sake of others. David loved the idea. His charity network sprang into action. We sent out invitations to men from caregiver support groups, single fathers networks, and community outreach programs. Next, I called Antoine, the caterer. "Antoine, the event is back on, but it's a different guest list. I want you to prepare the exact same menu you had planned for the wedding. The filet mignon, the champagne, all of it. But make it better." He was thrilled. The theme for the event came to me easily. Building your own table. It was a nod to my grandmother's words, a declaration of independence. I worked with a small team to put it all together in less than a week. We printed formal invitations. We arranged for transportation for those who needed it. I even hired the same 10-piece band Bronwyn had insisted on. Their music would still fill the hall, but it would be for a different cause. As I signed the checks for this new event, the feeling was completely different. There was no resentment, no sense of obligation. There was only a deep, profound joy. This wasn't money being spent to buy affection or to fulfill someone else's fantasy. This was money being used to create a moment of recognition and appreciation for people who rarely received it. I was taking the ashes of my old life, my old family, and I was building something new and beautiful from them. This wasn't an act of revenge anymore. It was an act of rebirth. Saturday night arrived. The ballroom at the Willows estate glowed, transformed. The lighting was warm and inviting, the tables adorned with elegant but understated centerpieces. The band played soft jazz in the corner. But the most beautiful part of the room was the people in it. The men who filled the hall weren't in designer tuxedos. They came in their Sunday best, a borrowed suit, a carefully ironed shirt. They were men of all ages and backgrounds. There was a man who had put his career on hold to care for his chronically ill wife. A single father who worked 2 jobs to make sure his daughter had everything she needed for her college fund. An elderly man who had spent the last decade caring for his ailing parents, whose own funeral he had arranged just months before. Their faces were etched with the lines of hard work and quiet sacrifice. And tonight, those faces were filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They were being served the finest food, listening to beautiful music, in a place they would normally never have access to. They were being seen. I walked through the room, not as a host, but as one of them. I shook hands, listened to their stories. Each one was a different verse of the same song I had been singing my whole life. The song of quiet duty. Later in the evening, David, my lawyer, stepped up to the microphone. He spoke briefly about the new foundation I was launching, a fund dedicated to providing grants and support for male caregivers. He called it the Isadora Foundation, in honor of my grandmother. Then he called me to the stage. I've never been comfortable with public speaking, but as I stood there, looking out at the sea of faces, I wasn't nervous. I felt a sense of profound connection. I raised my glass. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I want to thank you all for being here." I look around this room, and I see men of incredible strength. We live in a world that often tells us that our value is in what we provide, what we can fix, how much we can carry on our shoulders in silence. We're taught to be the rock, the foundation, but sometimes the foundation cracks under the weight. Tonight is about acknowledging those cracks. It's about celebrating the quiet strength it takes to show up day after day for the people who need us. For a long time, I continued, my voice growing thick with emotion. I thought my job was to earn a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. I thought if I just paid for the table, for the chairs, for the meal, they would finally see me. But I've learned a powerful lesson this year. Sometimes you have to stop asking for a seat. Sometimes you have to have the courage to build your own table. The room erupted in applause. It was thunderous, heartfelt. These men, these strangers, they understood. They had lived it. As the applause died down, my eyes scanned the room and landed on a figure standing near the back entrance, partially hidden in the shadows. It was my father, Thatcher. He wasn't in a suit. He was just in a simple collared shirt and slacks. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. His expression was one I'd never seen before on his face. It was complex, a mixture of regret, confusion, and something that looked almost like pride. Our eyes met for a brief second across the crowded room. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Then, as quietly as he had appeared, he turned and slipped out the door. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. It was an acknowledgement. And for now, it was enough. The gala was a turning point. It wasn't just a party. It was a declaration. The Isadora Foundation became my new passion, and I poured myself into growing it. The story of its origin, a dramatic tale of a canceled wedding turned into a force for good, was picked up by a local news station, and then a national morning show. Donations started pouring in. My life had found a new, meaningful direction. I didn't seek out news of my family, but inevitably, it found its way to me, mostly through my weekly calls with Grandma Isadora. She delivered the updates with her characteristic frankness, like a war correspondent reporting from a distant, crumbling battlefield. The first casualty was the engagement. Hayes's family, a proud, old money clan from the East Coast, was mortified by the wedding fiasco. It wasn't just the cancellation. It was the public airing of the Monroe family's dirty laundry. The story of their son's fiancé's family trying to fleece her own brother was not the kind of press they welcomed. About a month after the canceled wedding, Grandma told me the engagement was officially off. The Hayes family had cut their losses, as she put it. Bronwyn did not take it well. Her entire identity had been wrapped up in becoming Mrs. Hayes. Without Hayes's money and social standing, and without me as her safety net, her lavish lifestyle came to a screeching halt. Grandma said she had to sell her condo, the one I'd helped her buy, and move into a small, run-down apartment on the other side of town. The designer clothes and handbags began appearing on online consignment shops. One day, About 6 months after the gala, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Bronwyn. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I opened it. It was short and to the point. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. It was a list of her financial woes. Rent was due, her car needed repairs, she had credit card debt. The email ended with a single, audacious sentence. I was thinking you could just send me $5,000, that should cover things for now. The entitlement was breathtaking. She hadn't learned a thing. I thought about all the possible replies. A scathing lecture? A simple no? Instead, I did something else. I opened a new browser tab and searched for job-finding websites and articles on personal budgeting. I copied and pasted half a dozen links into my reply. My only message was, here are some resources that might help. I wish you the best. I hit send and archived the email chain. I never heard from her directly again. I had given her a fishing rod instead of a fish. I suspected she would starve before she ever learned how to use it. The news about my mother, Corinne, was less dramatic but somehow more profound. She had lost her primary source of power, control over me. She tried to exert that control elsewhere, becoming even more demanding of my father. But something had shifted in him since the night of the gala. He had seen a different path, a different way of being. He had started quietly going to therapy. He was finding his own voice after decades of silence. My grandmother told me he was finally standing up to her, refusing to enable her manipulations. The foundation of their marriage, already rotten, was crumbling completely. Karma, I was learning, isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes, it's a slow, grinding erosion, a quiet process of reaping exactly what you've sown. The final act of my family's implosion came about a year after the canceled wedding. It was a Tuesday when my father called me. It was the first time he had initiated a call since before the chaos. His voice was quiet, but steady. Leland, he said, I've left your mother. I was stunned into silence. Of all the possible outcomes, a divorce was something I had never considered. Their marriage, as dysfunctional as it was, had always seemed like a permanent fixture, an unbreakable, miserable bond. I'm staying at a hotel for now, he continued, as if sensing my shock. I couldn't do it anymore, son. The house was so quiet, so full of anger. All she does is sit there and talk about what you did, what Bronwyn did, what everyone did to her. She never once has looked in the mirror. He took a shaky breath. That night, the party you threw, I saw you up there. You were strong, you were happy. You had built something good out of all that ugliness. And I looked at my own life, at what I had built, and it was just a house of cards, held together by silence and fear. Dad, I didn't know what to say. Don't say anything, he said quickly. I'm not calling for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I stood by for years and let it all happen. I was a coward. I know that now. I wanted you to hear it from me. He told me he had left a letter for my mother. He hadn't wanted a big, dramatic fight. He had just packed a bag while she was out at her bridge club and left the letter on the kitchen table. Grandma Isadora, who he'd also called, later told me what was in the letter. She said Thatcher had written, Corinne, I have spent 40 years of my life trying to keep the peace. I mistakenly thought that peace was the absence of fighting. But I've learned that what we had wasn't peace. It was just a long, suffocating silence. You have blamed everyone for your unhappiness, but the one person you've never held accountable is yourself. Cannot live in that silence anymore. I need to go find out what my own voice sounds like. The news of the divorce sent my mother into a spiral. Without a husband to manage and a son to manipulate, her world shrank to the four walls of her house. She refused to see anyone, alienating the few friends she had left with her bitterness and venom. The perfect family picture she had curated her entire life had not just been cropped. It had been torn to shreds, and she was left alone with the pieces. I felt a strange, distant sadness for them both, for the decades they had wasted in a loveless marriage, for the family they could have been but chose not to be. But my sadness was outweighed by a quiet respect for my father. It had taken him a lifetime, but he had finally chosen himself. He was finally starting to build his own table. It was a late start, but it was a start nonetheless. The House of Monroe had officially fallen. Another year passed. The seasons turned, and life, as it always does, moved forward. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been the background music of my life for so long had faded away completely. In its place was a quiet, steady rhythm of purpose and peace. The Isadora Foundation was thriving. We had opened 2 new chapters in neighboring states. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding. I had found a new kind of family in the community we were building. A family built not on obligation, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. My personal life had blossomed in ways I never thought possible. I met someone. Her name was Clara. She was an art history professor, brilliant and funny, with a laugh that could light up a room. We met at a local art gallery, not a charity gala. She didn't know who I was or what I was worth. She was interested in my thoughts on Rothko, not my stock portfolio. With Clara, everything was easy. There were no games, no manipulations. We built our relationship on honesty and shared passions. For the first time, I was in a partnership where I felt seen for who I was, not what I could provide. One crisp autumn afternoon, I flew down to Arizona to visit Grandma Isadora. We sat on the small patio of her apartment, sipping iced tea and watching the desert landscape turn golden in the setting sun. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. We talked about her new gardening club, about a book she was reading, about Clara. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, she reached over and patted my hand. Her skin was thin and soft, like old paper. "You look happy, Leland," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Genuinely happy." "I am, Grandma," I said, and the truth of those words filled me with a quiet warmth. "I really am." When I returned home, there was a small envelope in my mailbox. It had no return address. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from my father. I opened it. Inside wasn't a letter, just a small, simple card. On it, he had written just 5 words. "I am proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes. Not tears of sadness or anger, but tears of release. It was the validation I had spent a lifetime craving, and it had come only after I had stopped needing it. I folded the card and placed it on my desk, a small monument to a long, painful journey that had finally led me home to myself. I had lost a family, yes, but I had gained a life. A real, authentic life, filled with genuine love and a hard-won peace. And as I stood in my quiet apartment, with the city lights beginning to twinkle outside my window, I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but your support makes it all worthwhile. Now I have a question for you all. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to choose yourself, even if it meant upsetting your family? I'd love to read about your experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more. Truly means the world to me.